Hey there, and welcome to the podcast, Fox Carolina's Weather or Not, and to What Degree. Chief Meteorologist Kendra Kent here, along with meteorologist Isaac Williams, and we're both in the comforts of our own home, of course, because of COVID. How you doing, Isaac?
Doing pretty well. Just wrapped up the 10 a.m. newscast. Just happy to be indoors because, it's
Oh,
just so dang hot out there.
it is. And, our neighborhood pool opened, and it's kind of nice because everybody spreads out. It's pretty much the only place I feel like I can take the kids to cool them off. And, otherwise it's like being outside's just wretched.
It really is. We've been, on the morning saying, okay, if you have to be outside, just have access to shade, the
Hmm.
AC, or water, or all three.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's going to be part of this podcast. Obviously, we're going to talk about the heat that we've been experiencing because we're doing a lot of complaining, but it really hasn't been that bad of a summer so far.
I
Um,
know.
it could be a
It's,
lot worse.
it could,
And
yeah. You're
so,
going to have some stats on that for sure.
yeah. So we'll talk about the heat. We'll talk about the tropical season too, the hurricane season. I know you've been digging into that because
Yeah.
we've just been setting records right and left with these. I mean, they haven't been blockbuster storms really, but there's just been a lot of them.
Yeah, and records are meant to be broken, and
Yeah.
this has been so far a record-breaking season, even though we haven't had any major disasters yet, which is good.
Yeah. Well, we're happy about that. Hopefully no more for the rest of the season. But just on a personal note, the two of us, we normally will have lunch together here or there, or you'll come over and watch football with my husband and I once the kids go to bed. It's
Yeah,
such a weird time we're in right now. I know everybody's struggling with it. You and I are friends, Nicole, Ben, all of us. We can't get together. Actually, we were just sitting there trying to talk about getting together as a weather team, and we really couldn't even figure out a way to make it happen. And it's frustrating. We just kind of have to make this work for the time being, I
yeah.
guess.
I just think just kind of prioritizing, not only our own safety but the safety of others, and unfortunately, our just normal has to be you kind of very either on hold or very much altered
Yeah.
until we kind of get things a little more stabilized. And it's so frustrating because I mean, who doesn't want to go, have a 10:30 a.m. brunch,
I
just
know.
out to your
I
favorite restaurant.
Exactly. I know. And you just feel like weighing the risks, and it's tough. But with the fact that the numbers are going up right now, and all this, it's very stressful for everyone. And I'm grateful in a way now that we're going through this second wave that we aren't in that insane tornado stretch that we had back in April. That
Yeah.
was bad too because of course we were dealing with COVID, but our numbers hadn't gotten to where they are now. And we were all having to go into the studio to cover weather. And of course, we were being careful, but at least with the weather calmer, it's not forcing us to all try to cover weather in the weather center together.
Yeah, I was definitely going to mention that. I mean, we've had our summer storms, but we expect those. But that stretch, March, April, and even it actually spilled over a little bit into May.
Yeah.
Was talking about records. I mean, we've had record-breaking seasons with that. And thankfully, that's kind of calmed down just a bit, and we can kind of catch our breath from that insanity.
Exactly. Well, and that kind of leads us to we'll start with the heat and then move on to tropics, since heat's really the most topical thing right now. If you're watching this week, again, we're in mid-July, and heat, it's obviously hot this time of year. 91 is the average temperature. So when I was digging around, I was thinking, we're complaining a lot about the 92-degree temperatures expected today. What did you guys go with for today?
We upped it to 94, I think,
Oh, flooring it.
only, only because we got to 94 yesterday, and that
That's
was
true.
on it. We had 92 yesterday, so I was thinking, well, I mean, so yeah,
Mm.
floor it again.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's funny, our area can be so diverse. I think Spartanburg Regional got to 91 yesterday. So like
and
it's
and
going to be
Clemson only got to 89. So
so there's going to be a variety, and we point forecast sort of for the GSP airport just because that's where our official records in the upstate are kept. But there'll be a wide range of temperatures. But what I thought was interesting, and you may have looked this up, but I'm going to ask you real quick. Do you recall the last time we had 100-degree heat? Do you know what year
well,
it
I
was?
you told me in a text message, so
Did I?
yes.
Oh,
But I was, if I didn't know that in advance, I would say probably 20. It's hard to get to 100 here,
Yes.
Because I was going to say probably 2014, even though I know the answer is a little more recent.
Yeah, 2016 is the most.
What was you didn't tell me the actual date though. When in 2016?
Well, I didn't write that down, so
Okay.
we'll go back. We'll find some of this information and we'll post it on the Facebook page or something. But it was July of 2016. So at least I know the month. That was our last 100 plus degree day. And in fact, July of 2016 was our third hottest July on record. And it's the hottest we've seen recently. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, like Isaac said, it's really, really hard to get to 100 degrees around here, mainly because our summers are fairly humid. You think about how much easier it is to heat up air in your house than it is to boil water. You have to put a lot more energy into heating up water. You put more moisture in the air, it's going to be harder to get it there, harder to see 100 degrees. You have to get a ridge, high pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere that is incredibly strong to get us to 101. Now, a heat index of 101 or 102, that's easy peasy around here. We'll probably see that toward middle, late this week. So, just something to think about. It may not be 100, but it'll certainly feel like it. Another interesting stat, this was a year before I got here, 2007. There were 10 days in August that were over 100 degrees.
That is wild.
I cannot imagine. I mean, that's a heat wave. I mean, technically any stretch of weather that's above normal is technically a heat wave, but that's a true, insane heat wave. So far for 2020, the hottest we've gotten is 94 degrees.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we actually hit that this has been recorded in mid-July. So July 13th was another one of those days.
Exactly. We've had 2 days at 94. Those are the hottest. We've had a few low 90s, but really we haven't had that many 90 plus degree days. And then the Weather Service keeps record of that, of the days that get 90 or above each summer. And I thought this was interesting. Last summer, 2019, we had 81 90 plus degree days, which seemed amazing to me. I had to kind of recheck that. But it's funny, summers can really vary. In 2013, and I remember this well, it was the summer Stella was born and we had rain like crazy all summer. We only got to 90 plus 14 times.
That is an insane comparison.
So 81 versus 14. And then most of the other years are in the middle.
Yeah, but also I think it's when you were here too, 2012, I believe that was when, you may not have this written down, but that's when GSP got to its all-time record, right?
2011, actually. And I had my last little stat. It was 88 90 plus degree days in 2011.
Wow.
In 2011, there was another record too, but I can't remember what it was. And
this year we didn't get to our first 90 degree day in 2020 until I forget the exact date, but it was sometime in June. And and we kept thinking, May was going to be it. And it's so crazy to think really when we start, having the 90 degree days doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't stay hot through September, even October, in some years.
I mean, yes. And that was another thing. My husband, Brandon, and I were talking about this. Sometimes it can almost feel hotter in September after Labor Day, because when football season starts, you just expect it to start getting cooler, So the heat just is more annoying to me after Labor Day. And this past 2019, you and I were talking about how we had those 90 degree temps into early October. So that's one of the reasons that 2019 ended up, with the 81 90 plus degree days, because they stretched all the way into fall that most people consider, Well, actually it's technical fall too in October.
Yeah, I remember forecasting in early October, I went for it. We didn't get there, but I went with 100 degrees just because of the fact that we had been so hot. It was completely bone dry. I thought, and I remember downtown Greenville got to 99 and GSP was 98, but we did have Toccoa get to 100 that day. So
I mean, somewhere got there.
I remember breaking the record of 7 or 8 degrees. I mean, we shattered the record even at 98, but I just remember, the fact that I'm even entertaining the idea of going 100 in early October is in upstate South Carolina, and then going back to what you said in September, I remember my mom and I went to the Alabama South Carolina football game in Columbia, and it was miserably hot.
Oh, gosh.
I mean,
It
miserably
always
hot.
is, I feel like, at Williams-Brice Stadium. But yes, that particular Saturday, I remember thinking, like, you better drink so much water and be so careful. Because
I did wear a white shirt that day. I got to do anything to protect myself here.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny, and we break all these records. We've had these, the most 90+ degree days. But it's kind of humbling to look back at all the records, because I think we sometimes get stuck in this notion that, oh my gosh, all this crazy stuff has only happened in the last few years. Then you go back and look, and really, some of the hottest on record were back in the 30s. This has been happening for quite some time. But it is amazing to me. I do feel like we've had some fairly remarkable years since I've been here in 08 with heat. But that's really most of the heat stats I have. But really just driving home the fact that, we may not get to 100 here that often, but almost every summer we get to heat index values above that. And that's all that really matters when it comes to, your passing out from the heat, because that's what it feels like to you. And the worst is when you get out there and you're sweating and that sweat won't evaporate and you just feel like you're drowning in it. You can't cool off. And so that's our typical delightful summer in South Carolina.
And, when you're speaking of moisture, a lot of our, viewers go to the lake, Jocassee, Kiowee, Hartwell, and in and around the immediate vicinity of water, obviously there's more moisture. So it's going to be locally worse feeling, if that makes sense. So, but then you want to be close to that so you can hop in for a, dip. And it's tough though, because in and around those big bodies of water,
it's so much worse. I know. Well, and speaking of water, during the summer, one of our greatest resources for any kind of drought busting rain, or really rain in general, is tropical systems. I mean, that's really the only way to get widespread rain here in the summer, unless we have some very atypical kind of systems come through. And, we really haven't been impacted a whole lot, but we've had some interesting ones, particularly, I forget the name of that one that developed off the South Carolina coast in like 2 seconds. Yeah. Just all of those that we had such a strange season so far. So I'm interested to hear some of your stats.
Well, yeah, first off, Barry, I was going to ask, remember Barry? And the answer is kind of no, because it literally on my shift formed, strengthened, and made landfall all in the span of when I was on the clock, which was...
I remember texting you that morning, and we've gone from, I guess, like a 20% chance to a 50 or 60 and then 90. And then we're like, well, it's going to be a tropical storm. And
tropical storm, and went right inland, close to Myrtle Beach. And, and that actually formed, that was the second named storm that formed before the season started. So Arthur was the first one back off the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and it formed in mid-May, which at the time we're like, okay, this is the 6th year in a row this has happened, not that groundbreaking here recently, but to have the B named storm also form in May, was a bit incredible. And, my computer, my notes are on my computer here. We've had 3 landfalling tropical storms this season too, which, if you think about it, that's hard to remember too. But Barry here, Cristobal in Louisiana, pronunciation nightmare.
Oh, it was how many times I checked that? I can't even tell you, because every time I would say it, it sounded wrong. And then
I know. And I resorted to just pointing to it at times, like the tropical depression. It's right there.
Yeah.
And then Faye, which was very recently back in New Jersey. So three landfalling systems. But as you mentioned at the start of this recording, there haven't been any hurricanes yet, or any just blockbuster systems. And the first time that we've gone this long without a hurricane was only 2011. And in 2011, we got to the I named storm before any hurricanes were named. But, we've been through F, so we've had 6 named storms this year, the fastest in history. So we've gotten to the F named storm about 2 weeks faster than the previous record, which was 2005. But, I was obviously, it's obvious comparison. Well, anytime you bring up the 2005 hurricane season, nobody wants to talk about it.
No.
Because of those 6 named storms in 2005, 3 of them had been hurricanes already, and 2 of them were major hurricanes. So
yeah, so
that just goes
different.
to show you that, just because we're rapid firing on these systems, thankfully, we haven't really had any issues so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, it is amazing. And it makes you wonder too, if eventually they will shift the hurricane season to start May 1st.
You'd hope so, because the Eastern Pacific starts in May. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are obviously some different characteristics between the ocean basins, but I mean, 6 years in a row, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in the record, I guess, is not that impressive, but I mean, there's a reason that happens.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. No, I mean, it's crazy. And I just think about some of the big ones that have happened, since I've been covering, these storms. I mean, obviously, and I'm blanking out right now, but the one that was at Florence that we tracked pretty much from
3 weeks
from Africa all the way for like 4 weeks. Yeah. I mean, I look back on that one and I still just am amazed at how long it lasted. I'm glad we have the technology we have, but the drama of Florence, when it's that far away and trying to conjecture on where it's going to go, and people on the coast just sitting on the edge of their seats wondering, and I'm again grateful that we have the technology that we do, but I know a lot of folks get frustrated with that. And then we've had some like Dorian last year, obviously.
And then Irma.
Yep. Irma was a big
Irma
one
was
for
such
us.
a huge, thankfully with Dorian and even Florence, they were large storms, but Irma was just twice the size, I feel like.
Exactly. And it impacted us so much in the upstate. I mean, I don't know if you remember, you and I were covering the weather and my neighbor called and said, "Oh, your tree's down in your front yard." Yeah. And I was like, "Oh my gosh," just the wind was insane from Irma. That was one of the first, well, no, we'd covered some stuff before that, but that was one of our big events that you and I tag teamed, I remember.
And I remember thinking, a lot of people were like, I mean, we were doing obviously a good job with warning people, but it wasn't even close to, it made landfall in southern Florida, moved through the Gulf, and then, I mean, relative to Florence and Dorian, it was nowhere close to here.
Yeah.
So
that wind field was huge. And that was one of those that was a tough one, because I feel like when storms make landfall in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, our citizens tend to not pay attention as much because that's so far. But those are the ones that actually impact us the most. Those are the ones that will bring us mini tornado outbreaks. They'll bring us wind, heavy rain. In reality, of course, for the coast, one hitting the East Coast is much worse. But for us, often those end up being non-events for our weather, because especially if they come in and do the normal curve up, we'll just be on the dry side of it.
I mean, I remember when Dorian was going by, I mean, it was 93 degrees and sunny here,
And actually and it's kind of nice because it switches our winds out of the northeast and kind of, but Dorian was a frustrating one. And, it's just the drama of forecasting, because, it was going to go right into Florida. You remember that whole thing? And then it started slowly inching. And that's when our boss, Kelly, she waits on every computer model.
Oh, yeah. I swear she has it before we do.
Oh, yeah. She sits there and refreshes. And I know that she just started freaking out when that trend began. And I kept just saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And it was, of course, there was some damage along the coast, but it could have been a lot worse if it was a Hugo kind of hit, if we gotten that hit perpendicular. And that's what's, interesting and different about these systems is sometimes it's just all about the way that they move in. It doesn't even have to be, strength is always a factor, but the way that they come into the coast can make a big difference.
Because, when speaking of Irma being a large storm, Michael last year, even though it hit Florida, it kind of angled itself kind of towards us, and we ended up having tornado warnings in the middle of the night, as it kind of was getting closer to us.
That's right. And I remember we were live on the air. All of us, I think, were in the studio when Michael made landfall as such a strong hurricane. Yeah, no, there've been so many, and I remember, it shows how long I've been here because there've been I think Faye has gone. How often do they repeat the names? Every
Six
10 years,
years.
every 6 years. So 2 rounds ago, Tropical Storm Faye, I forget where it made landfall. I believe, and I'll have to look this back up, but I believe it made landfall a good distance away from us, like somewhere in Louisiana. And it turned and went toward the Carolinas. And this was in 2008. And it brought me my first tornado outbreak that I covered when I became chief here. It was my first one, at least in my career in Greenville. And it was one of those days where, you just kind of knew something was going to happen. We had the remnant circulation coming through. It was 85 degrees and dew point of 70. I mean, just
Oh,
insanely humid. So, I'll just never forget it because it really wasn't even much of anything anymore. I think it was a very weak depression as it was coming by. It was just enough. And we had wall clouds and funnel clouds and Clemson, Townville. And I remember discovering Townville was Townville and not Townsville. I said Townsville, I think, and I got like
I'm sure
four
you were
emails.
corrected immediately.
Oh yes. That's one of the hardest things about starting as a meteorologist in an area that you haven't lived in is just learning the area, and you're going to have
Yeah.
your missteps along the way. And I feel like you were really good about researching those town names. I'm sure you had a couple of missteps, but I feel like you
Oh
came in and
yeah.
really knew the
And
counties and
I
stuff.
initially remember panicking too about covering 28 counties. I'm like, I'm never going to remember 28 counties, but thankfully all of our upstate ones are, it's pretty easy. But
Abbeville is in Abbeville County,
yeah,
Greenwood in
thankfully
Greenwood
so.
County.
Yeah,
Those parts were
I swear
easy.
I still get Swain and Graham counties mixed up
Oh
sometimes.
yeah,
So,
sure. Mitchell, Yancey
so
and Mitchell were hard for me because to me, Mitchell should be before Yancey because of the alphabetical order. Like I
yeah,
always want to put Mitchell for on the left and Yancey on the right, and that's not who
yeah.
they are. But yeah, no, it's a challenge.
But I do want to have one last
Yeah.
tropic
Oh yeah, go for it.
stat. So unfortunately, this may not be the best stat, but they have issued a La Nina watch in the next over the next 6 months. So basically, between now and the end of the year, uh, cooler Pacific waters typically mean a more active season for us, and that doesn't mean anything. But the fact that that's kind of being forecast in the next 6 months, hopefully, it's a weak La Nina and the
Yeah.
quote unquote response in the Atlantic isn't too dramatic.
Right.
So,
And I believe in one of our podcasts, if anybody ever wants to kind of go back, we broke down the impacts of those teleconnections like El Nino, La Nina
yeah,
on the hurricane season. And there's no huge, it seems like, I can't remember, I'm trying to remember the findings, but in strong El Nino years, there was a clear indicator that that really suppressed activity. And I
yeah,
feel like it was in weak La Nina or strong La Nina. I think both of them obviously see an uptick, and that makes sense because you often have less in the way of shear for storms too in La Nina environments. But I want to say we actually see more storms in neutral or weak La Nina years than we normally see in a strong version of either El Nino or La Nina.
yeah.
And we can go, I'll have to go back and fact check that one, but I'm fairly certain because I remember thinking like neutral is like,
I know it's the worst.
neutral's the worst. Well, and also, and it doesn't give us any real, there's no real indicator because some neutral years are very low key, but then some can be
Yeah,
very active. So that's always frustrating. But I think that we live in a world right now where people really like to know these long range forecasts and expectations for the season. And I think it's easy to go back after the season's done and be like, well, that forecast wasn't very good. But all we can do is use the overall weather patterns and the information that we have. I tend to be I'm really not a big fan of those hurricane forecasts of like saying how many there'll be. And I mean, that's just, there is a lot of science behind it. It's just it's a
yeah.
tough thing to verify. And I think,
But I forget which year. I think it was 2010, maybe, where we had a bunch of storms, but not one made landfall, which is good. And the forecast verified, but when people see that, they feel like they were all wrong,
exactly.
but in
Mhm.
the best way possible. If that makes
Yeah.
all kind of
Well,
sense.
Colorado State, they always say, just keep in mind, we're not forecasting or we're not saying how many of these will make landfall and yada, yada. Because,
Yeah,
yeah, all it takes is one big landfall in South Carolina, and it's a big season here.
Right.
So it doesn't even have to be. So there's no telling, but I have a feeling at this point, especially since things have calmed down now, generally in the Atlantic Basin, it's likely going to be pretty busy late August into
Yeah, and if there any
October.
other reason, it's 2020. I mean,
Of course.
why not?
I know. Well, I'm glad we could get together for a little chat. And
Yes.
I'm going to see. Hey, BK, come here. You want to be part of the podcast? I figure this is the first time I've ever gotten my cat.
Oh, we're having a debut.
Oh, okay. There he is.
Oh my God, hi.
When I was having to broadcast from home, he was sitting there like chewing on the wires. Like I was so scared that I was going to lose connection when I was broadcasting, because he comes in there and he'll rub up against my legs and start messing with all the lights. But he's a little jerk, but he's my favorite.
At least it was sweet for those 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm. What's your plan for the rest of the week?
Stay indoors as much as possible. Insanely enough, I went outside yesterday and did a run, and I don't know why I did that.
Wow.
I would not advise that in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, I feel like first thing, if you're a really early riser, but the problem is you have to rise and go straight to work. Like there's no way you can get up and run it. You'd have to run at like 3 a.m. And I feel like that would be really weird. Not going to do that. So go, just try to, stay inside, stay cool. Remember your pets, obviously, during this time. But anyway, well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. It was fun.
Yes.
Virtual hangout.
Yes, I enjoyed it very much, and hope the next one is just as great.
That's right. All right. Well, we'll sign off now and talk to you guys later.